establishment, whatever you want. Now comes the really depressing, terrible thing. They don't hide anything. They publicly boast about it and with pleasure, obvious pleasure, reenact. That's so depressive about this movie. For example, one of their main guys explains to the journalist who interviews him that it took them a couple of weeks to discover which is the most efficient and pleasurable way to rape a woman and at the same time kill her. Now that you need somebody to help you, who puts a wire around her head. I will not go into details. But now comes the horror. Not only is there no shame, but they do this in front of TV. In front of TV, namely, after a documentary about their life was done, they appeared on a talk show in one of the big state TV channels in Indonesia. And I couldn't believe that conversation. Like, the guy explains how to rape a woman, blah, blah, and then the moderator says, what a wonderful insight, a big round of applause for this gentleman, and so on. It's totally nightmarish. What makes it even more nightmarish but interesting is that they also report to the answer to the crucial question, how were they able to do this? Their answer is, but I'm not blaming Hollywood, don't be afraid, American movies. While they were torturing, killing, and so on, they even dressed as and copied their idea, because they were all movie fans. They liked James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, those gangster and film noir movies from late 30s, 40s, early 50s. And they acted, even dressed as those heroes. And they imagined themselves as those heroes in action. That's always, I claim, the crucial point. To see, how should I put it, to look at the, to analyze which fantasy, which phantasmatic screen made it possible for guys like this to do what they were doing. So, of course, the question to ask here is, what kind of society are we living in where even the minimal public shame is suspended? You know, the Nazis at least claimed, no, we didn't do it, denied it, and you have that famous statement by Heinrich Himmler that Holocaust, killing the Jews, will be the most glorious chapter of German history, but a chapter which unfortunately will never be written. Like, we have to keep it secret. Here it's not even that. They publicly boast about it. The crucial thing here, I claim, is that we should avoid two traps. First, the cheap America bashing, yeah, you see Hollywood, it was the influence, absolutely no, but also not the opposite mistake, which would be a more even racist one, yes, those primitive Indonesians and so on and so on. I think we approach here a much more difficult question of, first, the, let's call them in this learned term, dislocating effects of capitalist globalization. What kind of moral vacuum is created by today's global trends? Because things like this are not happening only in Indonesia. They're happening all around. This gradual, how should I put it, growing obscenity, shamelessness of power, and so on and so on. So, if you allow me to go on with another point, this is why, faced with this, let's call it shamelessness of power, maybe we who want to be the left today, I have here a very obscene proposition, but I mean it very seriously. Maybe the time has come when we, if we want to be still, I want to be a radical left, we should no longer play that role from the 68, you know, imagine the enemy as somebody uptight, conservative, with dignity, and we think we do something liberating if we, I don't know, talk dirty, provocations, and so on. Unfortunately, the power is turning more and more obscene, so maybe things like civility, decency, So maybe we should take it over. I will give you an example which maybe will hurt some of you. But the only guy who will appear an idiot is, as usual, me. I'm at least honest here. Do you remember, maybe some of you do, do you remember a couple of years ago, I think even 93, there was at New Museum of Contemporary Art in New York City, there was the retrospective and Andres Serrano, works 1983-93. There, a photograph, Peace Christ, caused a scandal. It depicts a crucifix immersed in urine, and then there was even a congressional debate, and so on and so on. Predictably, some left liberals defended this painting. Here is how they did it in New York Times. I quote it literally. Like Robert Mapplethorpe, Mr. Serrano struggles against inhibitions about the human body. His use of bodily fluids is not intended to arouse disgust, but to challenge the notion of disgust where the human body is concerned. It is possible to see Mr. Serrano's use of bodily fluids as pure provocation. But you can also believe that Mr. Serrano views them as a form of purification. The fluids make us look at the images harder and consider basic religious doctrine about matter and spirit. End of quote. The problem for me with this defense is that it works all too well. Its logic covers almost everything. Here comes, I warn you, this is obscene. Here comes my provocation. Let us say I were to publish a video clip depicting in detail how I shit. How the anal hole gradually gets wider, then the sausage falls out, while also showing the stupidly satisfied, relaxed expression of my face when the shit falls out. Then you told me, how can you do this vulgarity? Then here is what I will say. Quote, Mr. Zizek struggles against the inhibitions about his use of bodily excrements is not intended to arouse disgust, but to challenge the notion of disgust where the human body is concerned. It is possible to see Mr. Zizek's use of bodily excrements as pure provocation. But you can also believe that Mr. Zizek views them as a form of purification. The body gets purified by ejecting excrements. The excrements make us look at the images harder and consider basic religious doctrine about matter and spirit and so on and so on. You see my point? It works. So I'm not against very radical artistic provocations. I'm just saying they must really work. You know, like, it doesn't just work if you say, oh, let's provoke and so on. Those in power are provoking us enough. We get enough provocations from them. Now, this finally brings us to the big question you are probably waiting me to address, the question of violence. The great ideological divide between liberal and radical left concerns the use of so-called illegitimate violence. The radical leftist answer was developed, among others, by Bertolt Brecht, who, in his short text, The Intellectual Beast is Dangerous, writes, a quote from Brecht, a beast is something strong, terrible, devastating. The word emits a barbarous sound. But wait a minute, does he mean this critically? No, because then the text goes on. The key question, in fact, is this. How can we become beasts? Beasts in such a sense that the fascists will fear for their domination. We have to understand that goodness must also be able to injure savagely. And I think that Brecht, far from being a kind of a proto-totalitarian, is here at his most Christian. He is basically taking over those lines from the Bible, which I, of course, appreciate more. You know, all those theories of Jesus saying, I don't bring love, I bring sword, I bring devastation. If you don't hate your mother and father, you cannot be my follower. If you don't have a sword, buy everything you have, sell everything you have, buy a sword, and so on and so on. How to read this in conjunction with his love your neighbor, and so on and so on. I claim that